In 1998, a group of school children and their teacher took a field trip to the mysterious Devil's Punchbowl, a remote desert canyon outside of LA known for disturbing stories, missing persons, and just some dark history. This group was hiking along when all of a sudden, they spotted a jogger on the trail, and to their surprise, they actually recognized him instantly. This man was a canine police officer who had recently visited their classroom. For a moment, this was a very fun and heartwarming encounter, the kind of thing that you'd never expect to turn into an unexplained mystery. But just a few hours after they parted ways, locals heard a single gunshot echo through the canyon. Suddenly, this popular hiking spot wasn't just a scenic destination, it became the scene of an unsolved case, a real-life horror story, and a chilling true crime mystery involving a missing person that would haunt the community for years. And folks, today we're going to be taking our very own trip to Devil's Punchbowl, a virtual one that is. Now, I promise this trip will be safe for us, and plus this trip is free. All you have to do is click that subscribe button. We have a goal to hit 1 million subscribers by the end of the year, and frankly, we have a long ways to go, and so I would really appreciate it. Double check that you're subscribed. Okay, now I've heard a lot of awful and weird stories that happened in places with names like Devil's something, you know, Devil's Canyon, Devil's Tower. Hell, I even have a video here on my channel, an old one from a backpacking trip I did on a trail called Devil's Path in the Catskills Mountains. It wasn't easy, but I clearly hiked that trail successfully and made it out alive. Obviously, putting devil in the name of like an outdoor destination is a very popular thing, but I'm starting to think that we should stop naming things after the devil. I mean, can we agree on that? It just simply cannot be good for the karma and the vibes of these wild places that we're all adventuring into. I mean, with all these devil names, it really just feels like we're kind of setting ourselves up for something hellish to happen. Okay, I usually don't start my videos with a rant like that, but thank you for allowing me to get that off my chest. And now, allow me to introduce you to a man named Jonathan Aujay. John was the man jogging that I told you about in the intro, and he's also this canine police officer that ran into that class field trip in the Devil's Punchbowl on June 11th, 1998. Now, on the surface, some might say that John Aujay's life was pretty much the definition of success. He was an accomplished Army veteran, having served as a Special Forces paratrooper, which already makes this guy a total badass, obviously. I mean, he would literally parachute into combat zones, which is crazy. I guess driving into combat zones just isn't as cool, right? I'm telling you, he was elite. John went on to become a longtime deputy with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, working as a canine handler for their Special Enforcement Bureau. His canine's name was Bosco, and according to everyone who knew them, Bosco and John were super close, even by canine standards. LA County has the largest sheriff's department in the whole country. They cover a massive area and have to deal with some of the most challenging cases that you can imagine. And so John was obviously the type of guy that was up for that challenge. And as if his life and day job wasn't intense enough, John spent his free time training for ultramarathons and climbing mountains. John had been married to his high school sweetheart, Deborah, for 12 years, and they had a 5-year-old daughter named Chloe. John was 6 feet tall, 165 pounds, and obviously incredibly fit. He was great at his job. He loved his family. If I hadn't already told you this guy's name, you'd probably think I was talking about like Superman or something. And so on June 11th, 1998, John parked his white Ford pickup truck in the Devil's Punchbowl parking lot. He threw on his green day pack, and he set out for a trail run around Mount Baden-Powell. The time was about 11:45 in the morning, and he had told his wife Deborah that he'd be home from his adventure sometime in the evening, say right around when it gets dark. John had planned a very long training run for this day, which is something that he had done many times before, literally in this exact location, right? Hell, John and some of his coworkers had even run a 50-mile trail race the weekend before, which happened to be his 6th race at that distance, which is just insane. Oh, and he didn't stop at ultramarathons either. He had also led 10 different climbing trips up Mount Whitney, which is the tallest mountain in the contiguous United States. At this time, John was in the middle of training so that he could run the Western States, which is one of the more popular 100-mile ultramarathons in the U.S. And not long after he started his run on June 11th, he was seen first by that class of children. They obviously recognized him, and he kind of stopped to chat with them for a bit. He told the teacher that he was likely going to be out until around sunset, which matches the story that he told his wife. Now, we've all heard the joke about how weird it is to see your teacher, outside the classroom, out in the real world, but this situation has to be the next weirdest version of that. I mean, imagine being way out of town on a field trip and all of a sudden one of your former guest speakers is just jogging past you in the middle of his 20-mile run. I don't know, maybe it's not as strange as I'm imagining it. And maybe it just speaks to the tight-knit community of the greater Antelope Valley area, but the coincidence of this happening on this exact day is still pretty wild to me. And you're going to understand why in just a second. John eventually said goodbye to the school children and continued on his run. And then later, a jogger fitting John's description was spotted by 2 camp employees. And then the next sighting of John allegedly occurred at 6 p.m. that very same evening, where another employee claimed to have seen John with his green backpack and all walking through the parking lot back to his white Ford pickup truck. And then not long after that, a local reported something extremely unsettling to another park employee. They said that they heard one single gunshot in the Devil's Punchbowl area. Now, this is a rather rural and remote area, and so it might not have been too crazy to hear someone, shooting guns off in their backyard or in the woods or something like that. But knowing what we know now, the fact that it was only one gunshot basically just sends chills down my spine every time I say it. And so, yeah, folks, things are about to get pretty disturbing, obviously. But before we get there, let's just take a second to relax. Let's take a deep breath. And let me tell you about Drink Element.
Woo! This video is sponsored by Drink Element. I just finished a workout and I got kind of sweaty. I'm standing here in the sun, I'm sweaty. And the thing is, when you get sweaty like this after a workout or a hike or whatever, you gotta replace your electrolytes, because if you don't, you're gonna get muscle cramps, you're gonna get fatigued, all these bad things are gonna happen. And so I'm gonna do that now. See this right here? Some of that good grapefruit salt from Element. Element is the best electrolyte drink mix company out there. It's really not even close. Dude, this is gonna hit so hard right now. Oh, you don't even understand how good that is. Wow. And the thing is, Element isn't just for extreme gym athletes like me. That's a joke, obviously. No, seriously, it's not just for athletes. It's really for anyone who sweats. And so if you've never sweat in your life, then maybe it's not for you, but chances are you have. And so therefore it is for you. See how I connected the dots there? That's you can't argue with that logic, okay? Element has no sugar, it has no junk. You really wanna try it. Here's what I would recommend doing. Go to drinkelement.com/KyleHatesHiking. That's drinklmnt.com/KyleHatesHiking, and get yourself some of that grapefruit salt. That's what I just had. It's so good. It's probably my favorite, although I always go back and forth, but right now it is. When you make a purchase through my link, you are going to get a sample pack of 8 more Element sticks thrown in with your order for no extra cost. You're gonna get a variety of their most popular flavors, their best flavors. You need to do it right now. drinklmnt.com/KyleHatesHiking. Do it right now. Okay, want to get back to this crazy story? Let's do it.
Let's just recap this story real quick. We have this one mysterious single gunshot on top of tons of confirmed sightings of John throughout the day in Devil's Punchbowl, including someone who saw him in the parking lot, finishing his run, getting ready to go home, which makes it incredibly mysterious when you learn that John did not come home that night. John had said that he would be home around sunset, right? But the sun went down and his wife, Deborah, hadn't even gotten a phone call from him yet. And so obviously she began to worry. She even waited a couple more hours just in case. This is a hard decision to make, whether or not you should call someone about your loved one being missing. But by 11 p.m., she finally had to make that call, right? A call that no one should ever have to make. She called the police and she reported John missing. Amazingly, there were search and rescue crews on the scene by 11:30 p.m. And I want you to think about that for a second. Authorities heard that one of their own, one of their officers was missing, and they were able to instantly mobilize and search for him within an hour, which is not typically what happens when a hiker goes missing like this. Authorities arrived on the scene and immediately sealed off John's truck as a potential crime scene, right? And over the next few days, they used thermal imaging to kind of scan the area. They drove around on ATVs, and they even busted out an Army Black Hawk attack helicopter in order to look for this man. Even some local trail running friends of John joined in and kind of ran around the area looking for him. Everyone, and I literally mean everyone, was dead set on finding John. One of his former SWAT partners was quoted saying that John's tough as nails and that they'll find him and bring him out, and he'll probably have a sprained or broken ankle. People really believed that he was going to emerge and he was going to be okay. And that mentality makes total sense to me. I mean, John was the ultramarathon man, the tough military survivalist man. He was Superman, after all. There's just no way that he would be lost out there for long, let alone die or disappear. Or so they thought. As the search dragged on and on, people did eventually begin to wonder. I mean, what could have happened to John to keep him from coming home? Well, folks, the wilderness is called the wilderness for a reason. I mean, it's wild out there, duh. And with the increased danger and isolation of the backcountry, we all know that accidents do happen out there, even if you're Superman. I mean, maybe John was running and he took a misstep over a rock or a branch or something. Maybe he fell down into a ravine and was too far out of reach for search and rescue crews. And of course, the Devil's Punchbowl area is also home to mountain lions and dangerous snakes, so maybe he had some sort of run-in with wildlife. All these theories were initially being floated around, but it didn't take long before an alternative theory, we'll say, began to surface. Now, since John was a police officer, could there have been a much more sinister, even criminal explanation for his disappearance? In the late 1990s, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was dealing with a massive scandal. Internal investigations had revealed that some deputies had been taking bribes from local meth producers or something like that in exchange for tipping them off before big drug busts, you know? It also came out that some deputies were actually stealing money from drug dealers and just pocketing it for themselves. Despite no hard evidence of this, a lot of people were wondering if it was possible that John was somehow caught up in the middle of all this criminal activity and scandal. After John's disappearance, multiple police informants came out with some very wild information. One woman with connections to the local biker gangs in the area told police that she had heard John had come across a meth lab while on his run, and because of this, he was taken care of. Another informant claimed that John had discovered something else that he wasn't supposed to see and, quote, was going to be a hero and he was taken care of before being, quote, put in a hole. These tips ranged from pretty vague to very specific, but they definitely seem to at least loosely back up the idea that John could have come across like a lab or some other crime being committed by an outlaw biker gang or another violent group. However, it's worth noting that in this case, police claim to have disputed nearly all informant information, which makes sense because honestly, all that stuff sounds pretty crazy and pretty unlikely. Eventually, the informants either admitted that they were lying or the authorities just ended up catching them in a lie. One retired sheriff's department captain claimed that those informants must have been confused by all of the other deputy-involved scandals going on at the time, and that those tips should not be taken as fact. The police ended up conducting extensive informant interviews, but were quoted as saying that they could not get, quote, one piece of credible evidence from any of those interviews. So, was John killed by meth-dealing bikers, or could he have been hurt by someone in his own department? Again, I don't really know. It seems doubtful to me. As a member of the Special Enforcement Bureau, John would have been operating close to the edges of the sheriff department's black market busts, and he might have even had some access to sensitive information. So is it possible that maybe he just learned too much? It wasn't long before a homicide detective named Larry Brandenburg started investigating the possibility that John was actually murdered and that the killer could have been a fellow deputy. Brandenburg began working with another investigator named Darren Hager, and together they had collected enough evidence that led them to believe that John really might have been killed and that there was a true cover-up going on, even if some of the informant claims I told you about earlier were exaggerated. But then, right in the middle of all of this, Brandenburg was suspiciously pulled from the case. And then, even more suspiciously, Hager was fired. Years later, Hager would actually sue the county for wrongful termination, and in 2018, he won millions of dollars in damages. If Brandenburg and Hager had been able to fully investigate their leads, and if they had turned out to be right, the implications of all of this would be absolutely chilling. Was John threatened by the people in his own department? And if so, how high up did the conspiracy go? There was another bizarre yet obvious piece of information from the search that led a lot of people to think that foul play was actually involved here. I hesitate to call it a smoking gun because it was actually just a disappearing gun. That's right. One of the very first deputies to arrive on the scene recalled seeing a gun resting on the center console of John's truck. That deputy knew that John was too good at his job to ever just leave a weapon in plain sight like that. I mean, he would never run the risk of it getting stolen or falling into the wrong hands. I mean, that's just gun safety 101. That's not something a experienced officer like this is gonna do. Hell, the deputy wondered why John wouldn't have just had the gun on him in the first place, you know, in case he ever needed it way out in the middle of nowhere. It's not uncommon for off-duty police officers to still carry their weapon. But as if that wasn't strange enough, the official missing person bulletin about John curiously listed his gun as likely carried by John, like when he disappeared. And how could that be? I mean, the deputy on the scene insists that he clearly saw the gun sitting in the truck left behind. And yet somehow the gun was marked as missing, which begs the question, where did it go? And more importantly, if John had been killed, could that gun have been the weapon used? Another theory that started to cross people's minds was the idea that John might have disappeared on purpose. And this might surprise you, and so listen closely. John's sister, at least, even thought that that might have happened. She told reporters that John was, quote, checked out, done. He hated living in the Antelope Valley and had apparently dreamed about escaping off to Alaska somewhere. He was apparently miserable in his marriage, and his sister said that the last time that she saw John, it seemed like he was a man who was trying to say goodbye. Again, John was in the special forces, and so he definitely had all of the skills you need if you wanted to just kind of disappear like this. I mean, he would know how to live off the grid, create a new identity, and how to cover up his tracks, certainly. Maybe he had even been saving up his money in secret. John's sister didn't know how he would have pulled this off, but she was pretty sure of it. She was sure that John did not want to be found. But if that were really true, then what about his daughter, Chloe? What about this job that he'd worked so hard for? I mean, would he really be able to just leave everything behind like this? Oh, and something I just kind of glossed over for a second there, his marriage. What was that about his sister saying that his marriage was falling apart? As the search for John continued, it came to light that John and Deborah's marriage was actually coming to an end, and that John had plans to start a new relationship with a trail running friend of his named Vicky. Vicky, of course, was interviewed, and she would end up telling the authorities a slightly different story about John's trail run in Devil's Punch Bowl than the story that his wife Deborah told them. Vicky said that John described his run that day as a, quote, overnight walkabout, which one is not the same story that John told his wife or the class of school children on the trail, and two, that's a very Australian way to say that he was planning on hiking in the dark. But regardless of all that, now you're starting to see a little bit of a different picture of John's life. Maybe it all looked fantastic on the surface. You know, he's got this respectable job, he's got the wife, the kid, the success, but behind the scenes, we now see a man that was likely struggling and facing a gigantic life change. And to add on even more complications, we also know that right before John disappeared, he had turned down a promotion, a promotion to a supervisor job at the sheriff's department gun range And this was a job that he had initially requested. Like, he originally wanted a less intense work life in the hopes that he could try and save his marriage. And this job at the gun range was going to be just that. But in the days leading up to his run at Devil's Punchbowl, he had kind of changed his mind and told his superiors that his marriage was ending anyways, and that ultimately he just wanted to stay in his current job as the canine handler. He had also begun packing up a few of his personal belongings and even giving some stuff away to people. He packed up race medals and some of his hiking gear. He returned a family bookshelf to his in-laws. And he had even gifted his father's gold necklace to his new girlfriend, Vicky. Now, some folks might think that he was packing up all of his things because he was getting ready to move out or to skip town and just wanted to leave less things behind. But the police, in this case, had a different theory. They considered all of this information, John's job was demanding, his personal life was kind of crumbling, and he was giving away his stuff. And then you pair that with the single gunshot that was heard way out in the wilderness, and it was determined that John, you know where I'm going with this, might have been planning something even more tragic than I've discussed so far. Despite an intense search of the Devil's Punchbowl area, John was never found. That's right. They never found him or any sign of him out there. To this day, that remains true, and the police ultimately ruled his death as self-inflicted. Heartbroken, his wife Deborah would end up agreeing with this call. She noted that the last words that John ever said to her were, quote, "Have a nice life," as well as, quote, "Tell Chloe I love her." Now, you can interpret those words in a few different ways, but to me, it sure sounds like he was essentially saying, "You're never gonna see me again." Now, if his family accepts the conclusion that John took his own life, then that's good enough for me. It's really not my place to make any further determination. But I will just point out a few glaring holes in this story that I just can't seem to let go of. Again, I'm not implying anything here, but I think it's worth mentioning that if John did take his own life, especially with a firearm, then how is his body never found? I mean, there just doesn't seem to be an easy way to do something like that without leaving some kind of scene for search crews to find eventually. And also, why did he tell his wife and his girlfriend two different stories? He told his wife that he'd be back by dark, and he told his girlfriend Vicky that he'd be on an overnight walkabout. Those just seem obviously different from each other, but also not really different enough. I don't know, it just raises a red flag to me. It's weird. Oh, and while we're on the topic of Vicky, according to all of his friends at the time, John seemed to be excited to start his new life with her. According to them, he was getting out of this, toxic marriage and stepping into something full of potential, right? I mean, why would he just kind of throw all of that away? If John Aujay did in fact take his own life, then that's obviously a terrible, terrible ending to the amazing and accomplished life that we covered at the beginning of this story. I mean, this guy seemed like he was invincible, and it just goes to show that there can be so much hidden under the surface when it comes to those around us that look like they're thriving. And so if nothing else, then let this story be a reminder that anything can happen, even to the people that you least expect. His disappearance and presumed death also left behind his young daughter Chloe, and frankly, she might be the saddest part of this whole story. And as if this story wasn't already depressing enough, I have even more bad news to break to you guys. I'm sorry in advance to all of the dog lovers out there, but John's canine dog, Bosco, would end up dying just a few short weeks after John disappeared. A spokesperson for the sheriff's department told reporters that the cause of death was a ruptured artery, but Deborah's mother was quoted as saying that Bosco ultimately died because of a broken heart. Which, man, talk about a gut punch there. I mean, Deborah's mom really didn't have to do us dirty with that quote. I mean, just one time I'd like to read a story where the dog doesn't die at the end. I mean, first it was Old Yeller, then it was Marley and me, and now it's this story. But then again, I don't think my job here on YouTube would be the same if I only told stories with happy endings. And speaking of endings, this is the end of the video. My heart goes out to John Aujay and everyone who cared about him, his wife, his daughter. And of course, it goes out to Bosco. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. And YouTube seems to think that you'll enjoy watching this video next, and so give it a click. And if you're listening or watching on any other platforms besides YouTube, be sure to leave a 5-star review. I appreciate all of you guys so much.